this month with the mid-year reset, it is June, people. I cannot believe we're already halfway through the year. So we're going to just do a little bit of a reset, a little bit of a reflection. If you remember and you joined us in January, we had a kickstart to the new year. And sometimes that's what happens. We get all excited, very ambitious in the beginning of the year, and then things start to kind of fade out, fizzle out. And I think it's nice, like every 3 months, just to do a little bit of a check-in. And so I figured June is a perfect time to do this. So we're going to get started with this month's webinar. And hopefully some of the takeaways that you get at the end of this discussion is understanding those daily habits. I mean, I'm just going to keep repeating this stuff over and over again because sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't stick. And it's always nice to, again, go back and reflect over those things that can influence both positively and negatively our health and wellness outcomes. Also, understanding that it's about that consistency, those small repeated behaviors, rather than something that feels a little bit overwhelming or that cannot be manageable or sustained. That really does help with supporting our future, our health goals, and our overall well-being as well. And then we're going to do, so I don't want to treat this much like a webinar, but I also recognize not everybody here who has registered is attending live. So if you're joining live, you can always use the chat box, or you can just reflect upon some of the questions that I'll be asking you to engage with. And then if you're watching this as a recording, you can put comments in the comment box or however you want to engage with the video version of this, the recording version of this, to really figure out what personally you might want to reflect upon or integrate or let go of as the second half of the year progresses. And then we'll also talk a little bit too about those 4 health pillars that I always bring up at almost every webinar as well. So we'll revisit those too. So some housekeeping things in case you didn't hear it, you are being recorded. This is a recorded session because at the end of this, not only do you receive, or anybody who has registered for this who can't attend live is receiving a copy of the recording of this, but then also in a couple of months, I upload these to the Dish with Dina YouTube channel so that they are publicly available. You can use the chat box at any time. As it is currently, like I said, I have kind of like the panel hidden here just so I can focus on the screen, but I'll hop back and forth if anybody has any questions. And there's almost always a chunk of time at the end of these webinars where if you have any open questions, if they are, somewhat private or personal, we'll make sure we cut that out of the recording afterwards, but they don't have to necessarily relate to the wellness topic of the month. You can always ask me anything. I'm happy to offer whatever expert or other advice I can give. That said, as I always mention, I am a registered dietitian, not your dietitian. So please just make sure that you're not taking this as medical advice. Anything that we discuss in these webinars are to just be educational, informational. If you do decide to make changes to your own personal health and wellness approaches, please make sure that you're checking in with your own individual healthcare providers. Get medical clearance, especially when it comes to physical activity. If you feel like you want to move a little bit differently or more, or changes to your medicine, whether you're adding something or supplements, please make sure you're running that by your health and wellness professionals. And then last but not least, as I said, this does get recorded, but also what we do at the end of, well, I usually say within a handful of days. Sometimes I'm a little quicker and sometimes I'm a little slower with getting this out, but I send an email to everyone because when you register, you do provide the email. There is a disclaimer that you end up being on my distribution list, but I don't think I inundate anybody. I do a monthly wellness newsletter that goes out, and then we do these follow-up emails that go out to the registrants of every webinar just to give you the link to the recording. I'm also doing handouts now, so you'll get a link to the handout, and then you'll also get kind of like a preliminary link to the next month's webinar, which I'll explain a little bit about at the end of today's discussion. There's also a survey link there too. It's really helpful for me, us. I say us sometimes because I work with nutrition students and dietetic interns who help me piece together some of the information that we provide to you in these webinars. And it helps us know if we need to improve anything, or even topics that we haven't thought about that you might want to learn a little bit more about, that you can always submit those recommendations and we'll integrate them in future. Because I've been doing this this is like 4.5 years now, I think. Pretty consistently, I might say. Very proud of the content, the collection, the library of information that we're able to share with all of you. So if we've never met before, hello, my name is Dina D'Alessandro. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. I work and live in and around the New York and New Jersey areas, but I also run a private practice that I see patients across state lines virtually through telehealth platforms. I went back to school as a second career in order to get this credential. So that was at Lehman College in the Bronx. Hello to those of you who are joining that know me from the campus. And on that campus, I was so loyal. I spent so many years there that they gave me not one but two jobs. So I'm an adjunct lecturer of undergraduate and graduate nutrition studies in the dietetics, food, and nutrition department, the health sciences department. And then I'm also the campus dietitian over at the Student Health Center. So during the spring and the fall semesters, I help with nutrition counseling in the wellness office in the health center to any of the currently enrolled Lehman College students there, which is quite lovely. And I've done a bunch of other things. You can read all about me or click on some things that I'll share with you at the end if you want to learn anything else about what I do, who I am, and where I'm going in this life. So one of the things that I had researched first was for this topic was understanding a little bit of the common mindsets that happen around, well, technically around like February, like 6 weeks into the new year, a lot of people start rethinking these resolutions. But a lot of times too, this midpoint, the mid-year point comes up and starts weighing on people in that I should be further along by now. Any of these goals that I set out felt doable, and now all of a sudden I'm at a screeching halt, or it feels like it's very overwhelming. I meant to set out to completely overhaul my life, and this is not at all sustainable for me, and so I'm getting very overwhelmed. So you can see on the right-hand side some of the language, the mindsets that I came across when I was researching some of these topics about what people go through. So maybe that's something you recognize for yourself as well. Like I've fallen off track. That's something I say a lot. I got to get back on track. Got to get back on track. Or maybe you have an all or nothing approach, right? So maybe you think to yourself, okay, I've been motoring along for 3 months or 3 weeks, and then I ended up getting sick, or I had a change in my financial situation, or my job let me go. And then everything runs to a screeching halt. And so if I cannot continue to do this, if I can't continue this momentum, then I'm stopping completely, because what's the point in moving forward? Instead of really reconsidering that it's not like you have to start completely over. You just need a little minor tweak, a little recalibration. There's always the next minute, the next meal, the next day where you can just say to yourself, okay, I'm ready to breathe and get back into it. So here's one of my first questions to you. Again, if you're watching live, you can chime in the chat. I won't be able to see it just yet, but I'll check in a little bit later. How do you feel right now about your overall health, whether it's physical health, whether it's mental health, whether it's anything related to your well-being? What do you think is maybe one word or a term that kind of describes how you're feeling right now? And I'll give you a sec if you want to just reflect on that privately, which is totally okay too. For me, I always disclose everything. I'm very transparent in my life because I'm a dietitian, but I'm also a human being who goes through her own journey and things. My health right now feels very disjointed. I do not feel like I'm leading and living by example right now. As a lot of you know, I'm taking on the role of a full-time caregiver for my mom who's undergoing some medical health issues. And it feels like there's a pileup of things. And, as much as we try to say, find the time, if it's important to you, you'll do it. Sometimes there's just an unrealistic amount of things that are on somebody's plate. So I just feel like it's a bit disjointed for me right now. Maybe you're feeling that way too. Why habits matter, though, why including, at least even if it's a little bit of small things. So we'll talk a little bit about what changes or what things you can integrate or move through in the coming slides. But I always like to decide on what the why is. Why are things important to you? Or why does the research say we should make sure we're spending time on prioritizing these things? Well, for starters, if we're looking at overall health and longevity, right, for those of you who attended the Blue Zones and Healthy Aging webinar we did a couple of years back. Living longer. We're all living longer in this world. We're living up to the 80s and beyond. Sometimes people are even living into their hundreds. I joke, I'm tired now at the tender age of 57. I don't know how much longer I feel like I can perform at my peak. But the point is we want to make sure that we're not ending up significantly overwhelmed by a lot of chronic conditions and things that are going to put us out of commission. So lowering the risk factors of diabetes, chronic conditions, heart disease, etc., and also mental health issues, that stress that plays a role on us as well. If we can manage those things by implementing some of these daily habits, then hopefully that improves our outcomes later on in life. The second thing, too, is what's called mental fatigue. Mental fatigue is something where you're just, I can't remember what it is. It's like tens of thousands of thoughts and decisions that people make every single day. Every moment you're deciding something, even if you don't realize that you're actually actively doing that. And so when you create these habits that feel a little bit more like they're on autopilot, your brain expends less energy on those minute choices. That becomes something that can just run on its own, and it frees up your ability to work on more complex tasks. So think of the last time, because this is what's happening to me now too, right? My brain has become a bowl of mashed potatoes, as I like to say. Think of the last time somebody's talking to you and you're like, oh, I didn't even hear what that person was saying. Or you get distracted if you're driving a car, or you miss an exit, or just like little things like this, that your brain is just constantly chattering. And so putting some of those daily habits in place that become very, like I said, very regular, very automatic, very autopilot, can hopefully free up some of the other parts of your brain that are needed to help you manage your life. And I'm like, seriously, like, we don't want to get into an accident. We don't want to fall down a flight of stairs because we weren't paying attention to things. Little things like that really add up. The third thing, too, is providing stress relief. If you have attended these webinars, we talk about the heart a lot, heart health, high blood pressure. We talk about all of these things related to how chronic stress and gut health, by the way, how chronic stress, brain stress, frustration, things that are feeling very challenging, things that you cannot overcome, how they can affect different parts of your body. So there's the gut brain axis. If you're kind of struggling up here, you might have issues, digestive issues, problems with metabolizing or processing certain foods. And you also might be at an increased risk of high blood pressure, which can lead to heart disease, etc. There's also that mental load that happens too. So when you have something that's a little bit more structured or predictable, like, every day on a Tuesday, or every week on a Tuesday, I do this, or every morning at 5:30 a.m., I do this. Your body, again, has that kind of like sense of control, and things don't feel so very willy-nilly. And that uncertainty that happens when you're kind of a little bit all over the place can really end up stressing us out. And then last but not least, I mean, habits matter. There's a lot of different things that can be included in this slide, but I chose the top four. The last one here was creating sustainable results. What I've said before too, if something cannot be done realistically, it's going to fall off. You're going to maybe feel very overwhelmed. And then the negative self-talk starts, right? I stink at this. Every time I start, I can never finish. And or I failed at something that I set out to do. But when you are creating those incremental changes that feel small and steady and become a little bit more natural, then that enforces the sense of confidence, accomplishment, and it becomes more manageable and sustainable long term. So this is why sometimes, like, I give the example, which sounds so cliche, when people say, on television commercials, they'll say things like, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. I like that, because to me, sometimes we think of certain terms or like resolutions to be just to get us to whatever is going to happen, right? Get us through an event we're going to, or get us through the holidays. But instead, we're really trying to invest in our own personal growth and our personal health. And we want that to be something that the future us, whatever age you are right now, think of the 20-year older version of you. I always say my middle name is Rose, and I always call her Rosie. I'm like, Rosie's going to be so mad at me for doing this, or Rosie's going to be so excited that I did this today. So again, think of the future you when you're going through this. Now, in these webinars, I brought this up a ton of times too. There's tons of like what we call pillars of health, meaning if you think of the foundation of a building, right, the columns or the pillars that hold up that foundation, same thing kind of applies to our physical and mental well-being. If one falls down, if one of those pillars fall down, odds are that the rest of the pillars are not going to be able to hold up the structure without the support of that other one. And so they might all fall down. And as you strengthen one pillar, hopefully the other ones will kind of be re-supported or supported as well. So in my world, I tend to focus on food and nutrition, physical activity slash fitness slash movement, mental health slash stress management, and then sleep quality and quantity. So sleep hygiene overall. So we're going to launch into this right now. And I'm going to, again, ask if you'd like to engage either in the chat, or if you're watching the recording of this, you can chime in the comment section, or just reflect on your own. So a little recap of the things that we've discussed with the pillar number one of being nutrition in the past has been meal timing. How often are you eating to maintain energy, meaning calories, stable blood sugar, so you're not spiking and dropping and getting that hangry sensation throughout the day or getting dizzy because you forgot to eat. So the meal timing of things, are you eating quantity and quality over the course of the day in the appropriate manner? Or are you forgetting to eat, not doing anything, grabbing some, random snack out of a vending machine at 2 p.m. and then eating the biggest meal that you possibly had the entire day 2 minutes before you're about to go to bed. So the meal timing is something that we've talked about in the past. You can always go back and check out some of these other webinar recordings to get a little bit more insight into that. And the recommendations that we do make, because as you know, if you've worked with me or if you've heard me saying this in the past, all foods fit, right? There's food freedom in my world. There's food neutrality in my world. I try to be very conscientious with not placing restrictions on anyone. Obviously, with chronic conditions or allergies, there's going to be some exceptions. But the point is, eat whatever you want. However, always try to make sure that these three things that you see on screen here have some sort of representation in as many of the meals as possible during your day, during your week, etc. You're going to have some fibrous foods. So the hierarchy of fiber containing foods are things like beans and legumes. Then you have things like your cruciferous vegetables like kale, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, etc. Even avocado brings to the table, literally, no pun intended, some fiber there as well. So we're talking about densely, nutritionally dense, very colorful fruits and vegetables. Things with skins on, those are fiber dense. Whole grains, those are fiber dense. Protein, okay. I kind of joke at this because I don't remember if I said this in the last webinar, but I walked by a Starbucks recently and outside was one of those sandwich boards. And sometimes they're like, this season's flavor is whatever. And they were showing a picture of like their protein coffee. And I was like, kids, we have gone too far. Okay, you don't need protein in like everything that you're eating and drinking too. Get your protein from protein sources. Just make sure it is represented. And the reason why we prioritize this is just by nature, as we age, we do end up losing muscle mass. And protein is very important for so many things in repairing our cells and also maintaining our muscle mass as well. It also helps keeping us fuller longer because it's a bit of a slower digestion. And it contains the same amount of calories per gram that carbohydrates does. But again, it's a bit of a slower on the digestion, slower on the blood sugar, and it can help with maintaining that muscle mass later on down the line. Hydration. Again, you don't have to drink. Well, I think some people drink like their body's weight in water. You could do that if you want to, but there is such a thing as being overly hydrated. So I tend to say, when you pee, take a look in the toilet. If it's a fairly pale colored yellow, you're probably hydrated enough. And don't discount the food that contains water as well. Things like cucumbers and salads and water dense types of things, or teas and stews, etc. That counts towards your hydration or your fluid intake. So underneath here, I threw in a couple of practical strategies. Maybe I do this. I put things on rotation. I don't love eating the same exact thing all the time, but I definitely have some default meals, things that I go to that feel very autopilot again, right? I don't have to think so much about it. It's smoothies are on rotation. Oatmeal is on rotation with my peanut butter. My eggs and my avocado toast is on rotation, etc. So I have a few default meals that are always on standby. Then you can also think of anchoring your meals to your daily routine. So when you have a natural break in something, you might say, okay, this is time to eat. That doesn't work for everyone. Especially if you do, like I do, you have a very erratic schedule, like not every day is exactly the same. So you might, in that case, maybe want to set timers or reminders for yourself. And then again, understanding that decision fatigue. What do I eat? What do I eat? What do I eat? What should I make? It's done for you if you have some planning ahead of time and you put some thoughts and preparation for that. So we'll get to some of those recommendations a little bit later in the webinar. So here's another question for you. Think to yourself, what is eating most inconsistent for you right now? Is there something that you feel is a little bit off track? Is it a weekend? Is it midday? Is it first meal of the day? Is it end of the day when you're kind of coming home? Where does it feel like there might be some inconsistencies? And is there a way that you can kind of course correct that? Pillar number 2 is movement, physical activity, fitness. Again, not everybody loves working out. You don't have to do that. Not everybody can afford or likes to go to a gym. You don't have to do that. Just think of it as, how do I let my body be as active as possible? And understanding that even the smallest little things count. So not necessarily having to break a sweat, but maybe getting that heart rate up, getting the oxygen flowing, the blood flowing, etc. And that neat number 3 bullet right there, we've heard that before. That's non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically just all the things you do throughout the day that are like fidgeting or go walking back and forth. Those things account for movement. So don't feel like it has to be a structured 60-minute at the gym on a treadmill, etc. It's all these little things add up over the day. The idea is not to be sedentary. So some of the strategy recommendations here are consider movement like food, right? I'm getting snacky. I need to get up and get a little handful of something. Think of a snack break as an or an exercise break as a snack break too. Maybe just have a little burst of energy getting up. It's been, it's time for me to move my body a bit and boom, there's something there. There's also something known as habit stacking, meaning I'm already doing something. I might as well add in this to that too. So the example on screen here is if you're walking or you're going from place to place, well, in New York City, it's a little hard to do this with all the traffic and the noise, but maybe get on a call, maybe knock some of those things off the list there and move while you're doing it. I just did this earlier. I had to take advanced training for the diabetes prevention program that I do lifestyle coaching for, and we have to maintain our credentials and our training certification for that. It was only a half an hour training, but I was like, what am I just sitting here for? So look, see, they're not dusty anymore. I grabbed those dumbbells behind me and I was just marching in place and just doing a couple things like this, and boom, 25, 30 minutes later, I had done a full body workout, some squats, etc. So just like, I'm in the middle of doing this, I'm brushing my teeth, maybe I'm doing some leg kicks or whatever you feel like feels comfortable. And understand there's flexibility. I always try to ask people, how do you define consistency? How do you define success? If it's 5 days a week doing something 30 minutes a day, great. If not, maybe you can only fit things in on a Sunday and a Wednesday night. That's fine too. So think about the question on screen here. What comes to mind for you? What kind of movement feels doable this week? I mean, right now at the time of this webinar and this recording, it's Thursday. So maybe what feels doable in the week that's coming up or as you enter into the weekend? What's something that you feel like you want to get back into? Mental health. Okay, we're never going to be 100% smiles and rainbows all the time, even if you're on meds and even if you're going to therapy. There's going to be some ups and downs, highs and lows. That's the nature of humans. It actually is good to kind of have those fluctuations. So we just want to normalize that sometimes we don't feel great and sometimes we feel a little bit better. But understanding that when you have that chronic stress, like I mentioned before, it can definitely affect things like your heart health, hormone health, appetite, sleep, etc. We've even had conversations about mindfulness activities and sleep hygiene as well in past webinars too. So you're more than welcome to go check those out and dive a little deeper if you need some support. Asking for help here too is a big thing as well. Some of the practical strategies could just be like, just take a 2-minute reset. Like, oh gosh, I've been staring at this computer for how many hours? Let me just back away and just stare out a window or just go and maybe text a friend or give myself a little breathing space. Do be careful with how much you expend. Saying yes to things is great if you have goals, but being careful with your time and your energy. Like I mentioned before, there's only so much time that I have in a day, in a week, and there are a lot of priorities. And right now, I'm behind on deadlines. I'm ignoring people's phone calls. I can't get it all done. But I can't feel bad about that because there are definitely things that are just taking priority right now in my life, and I just have to be okay with it. Having said that, I still go because at my mom's now, so I have access to her car. She doesn't drive it. I do all the driving when I'm here. So having said that, I will get in the car and go for a 1 hour ride and think to myself, I'm happy I'm doing this. I don't think to myself, okay, well, I should really have taken this hour and like following up on emails and stuff. Nope, my time, my time. So I'm placing some boundaries around what I am able to give as far as time and energy. The reframing is a big thing too, right? Perfectionism is not really a thing. Sometimes people feel like they are perfectionists or multitasking, trying to get everything done, but sometimes good enough is good enough. And my dad once said to me that sometimes if you think about who you are in comparison to other people, right? Maybe good enough for you is better than anyone else's best. You're already doing your excellent work. Don't be too hard on yourself. Good enough is fine. Now, I was going to do a guided exercise for 60 seconds, but the last time I set a timer for 1 minute on here, it felt like a year and a half. So I'm just going to set a timer for all of us to take a moment. Let's even just do 20 seconds for this, because I've been talking a lot right now, as you can tell. And just take a deep breath. Not 20 minutes, 20 seconds. That's so funny. I just set my timer for 20 minutes. That would have been a little bit too long. Get yourself in a zone where you just feel maybe the stress relief. Maybe you pay attention to things like I can hear the ceiling fan over my head right now. Maybe just take a deep breath in loosen up some of the joints and things, your back, your neck, your shoulders, etc. And just take a moment for yourself. Now, even 20 seconds, again, in cases that people who are very, very busy or like to be busy a lot, that feels like a good chunk of time that has just been completely sent away. But it's important for us to just pause for a moment and get back into that zone. All right, next up we have sleep. We've talked about sleep a million times in these webinars as well. Sleep is so, so very important. Even as a dietitian, if I'm working with somebody who has very poor sleep habits, I'll say don't even prioritize the food and nutrition conversation just yet. Let's figure out what's going on with sleep because it can affect so many other things in life, in health. And if you remember, we did a brain health webinar a while back as well. So poor sleep habits, quantity and quality, if that gets disrupted, patterns wise, not once in a while, but if you're like an ongoing insomniac, if you're not getting that sleep in check, that could put you at risk for neurodegenerative disorders like dementia, Parkinson's disease, etc. So please be very careful with how you are managing your sleep. Some of the strategies here, even with an erratic schedule, like I don't have a 9 to 5. Some days I work 12 to 8, some days I work 10 to 4, but I try to have a consistent sleep and wake window. I try to allow my body to say, I am ready to rise. And maybe that's a little bit flexible on weekends or days that I'm not working, but rarely will I ever sleep until like noon because I'm used to just like having more productivity or time to myself in that early AM chunk. And then I don't really love doing things very, very late at night. So I don't want to stay up too much later than I would normally do. So I'm like a 5:30 to 9:30, 10:30 type of gal. Wind down routines. I have an 8 o'clock p.m. alarm that goes off on my phone that's like, and now you're done. So that reminds me, screens close everything down, prepare for the next day, go change your physical outfit, like get out of work clothes and put your jammies on, brush your teeth, wash your face, wash off the things that are there. And oh my gosh, I just came across this language of revenge bedtime procrastination. I do this every now and then. This is basically the day's been so busy that the only time you have to yourself is when you plop yourself into the bed and you're finally like, oh, now I can check all the email, or now I can get those things done, or now I can plan for my day instead of kind of like chunking out that time before you even hit the bed. The bed should be a sacred place. Your sleep time should be a sacred place. It should not be interrupted. So try to rein that in if that's something that you've been doing too. So think about on the slide here, the question for you all to think about right now is what is one small thing that you could change about your evening? Think about what, I mean, you can see the bed behind me when I'm at my mom's and I work out of her guest bedroom. This is my home office. I wake up, I make the bed so that it looks really pretty. And when I'm about to go into it, I turn it down and I spray a little lavender and I set the ceiling fan on and I get like the temp control in here because this is the hottest room in the house in the summer and the coldest room in the house in the winter. So I try to get the temperature to my liking. I put things away. Maybe dim the lights a little bit and I get ready for bed. So think about something if sleep is an issue for you, what is that you can adjust going forward? Now, I used to be a project manager back in the day. I think that skill set lends itself well to what I do as a dietitian with helping people go from A to B to C to Z. And some of the language that I remember hearing or I'm used to hearing, especially when it comes to health and wellness goals and journeys, etc., is things like willpower and discipline, but also understanding that sometimes it's not really just like our individual mindset of things. It's what else exists that allows us to implement those or execute those plans. So think to yourself, what are some things that are repeated that you're already doing or things that can be put on repeat? What already fits into your routine? What feels easy? If you're the type of person, not like me, right? If you're a type of person who's a little bit more of a night owl or a late waker upper, and you're like, well, I saw on YouTube and TikTok that everybody's getting up at 5 a.m. Well, maybe that just doesn't fit into your lifestyle or your routine. So don't try to squeeze that in. Decide on how it is that you're already living your life and let all of the systems flow in with it. So the difference between this language is that willpower kind of focuses on the fact that, I've got to get things done. There's the finish line happening here. I have limited time to work on this, right? So I feel very rushed or very stressed out when I'm trying to rein things in or be super, super disciplined on something versus having these systems in place, as I mentioned before, reducing that decision fatigue, having things available available to you that are kind of on autopilot, making the best use of your environment too. Maybe, you don't want to get up all the time to grab what you need. Things are already available to you. So having those systems in place, focus more on the productivity, the efficiency of it all, reduces that brain fatigue, that chronic overthinking, and allows those habits to fall into line quite nicely. So how do we build better systems? A few things I said before too, like that habit stacking thing. So tying new behaviors into things that are already existing into your day. This could be, putting your workout gear on your door because you're already going to be going out to check the mail or whatever, or you need to get up anyway and go to the bathroom in the morning. So that's right there. And then you can just put that on. That kind of reduces that friction where you might need to then move through to whatever habit you are forming. Automate and delegate. I'm a huge, listen, I don't love that the robots might be taking over, but I'm okay with using them for what I need them for. So things like my Gmail. I got filters and folders and things just kind of organize themselves in there so that when I need to focus on what I need to respond to, it's automatically right there. Technology, right? Other things in technology too. My phone is on me all the time. I set reminders, I set alarms. So all of those things come out of my brain and I can say when that alarm goes off, I'll be ready to go on to that next thing, or this is telling me to wind down. Subscriptions, pros and cons. If you're subscribing to something that is helpful to you, like maybe you got one of those productivity tools like Notion, and maybe you upgraded to that can help with alleviating some of the tasks that you have at hand. And of course, developing those routines, those things that are going to feel very automated, very regular, and very easy. That helps with building the systems in there as well. And the last thing, so I talked about friction, I use that language just now. So, taking out the friction is helpful in some cases. And in other cases, you actually want to put it back in if you feel like it's going to cause you, I don't like the word bad habit, but if it's going to cause you to kind of fall out of step with the things that you really think are important to you or leave you not prioritizing things. So, an example could be putting on one of those block apps on your phone. Like I'm not allowed to scroll on the internet or on Instagram after, 10 minutes of time. Taking out the batteries of something, logging off of something, increases the activation energy. So in the world of food and nutrition, if you like me, if you have a sweet tooth and you're like, man, I could eat dessert 3 times a day if I was left to my own devices, maybe my friction, my activity energy is I prefer to go outside to get ice cream. I like good quality ice cream. So I won't necessarily have it in the house, but I'll go out and get it. So there is that thing where it reduces the temptation of me being like, yes, I'm okay with having flexibility around food, but I know that I don't have a turn off switch when it comes to chocolate. So I'd rather kind of force myself, if I'm going to go get it, let's just go out and get it and enjoy the time outside. So that's my activation energy and my friction that I've applied there. Okay, so next here in the coming slides, I just want to share with you like some examples of things that might be useful to you. I gave, those 4 pillars just now, but creating for yourself this mid-year reset plan. So if you have a notebook right now, a planner, a personal device, electronic device, etc., feel free to take notes or obviously screenshots, and you can always watch the recording after this as well, or watch the recording in general if you're watching this in the recording or on the YouTube channel later on. And think to yourself, where do you see some of the things, like the questions that were asked before, in those 4 pillars, whether it's one or all 4 of them, where you might want to focus on. Now, in the world of an actual day, I thought it was kind of cool to do this, like a little bit of something that I can maybe apply to each part of my day that I'm naturally doing something. So in the morning, I might get up and I go to the bathroom, or maybe I'm preparing my breakfast. In the midday, I have maybe a natural break where I'm going to say, okay, that's like around lunchtime for me. And then my evening winds down. Like I said, I have that 8 p.m. alarm that goes off. That's kind of like, okay, you're ready to go to bed. And then weekends are a little bit different for me as well. I don't do as much work during those weekends. So that might be a little bit more flexible. So think about how your day and your weekly calendar, your schedule is structured, and see if any of these recommendations apply or are useful for you. So you can see on the top there, right? Small, repeatable self-care habits that support overall well-being. Small, repeatable, so things that are just going to be naturally occurring on autopilot. Starting the day with intention. Maybe some of you wake up and do devotionals. Maybe some of you do yoga. Maybe some of you, I have a water bottle. Like I immediately drink water first thing out the gate, out of the bed, not even out of bed. Sometimes I sit in the bed and drink my water. So think of some of those things that's just kind of like me time, whether it's 5 minutes or half an hour, whatever you need, just to kind of kickstart that day and use that as a reset, especially if there are things that maybe kind of carried over from the night before that you're like, shoot, now I have to get up and I have to kind of do all this stuff the second I wake up. Just give yourself a brief moment. So some of the suggestions here, the breakfast, like kickstarting it with even what we call a balanced meal, protein, fats, and carbs. Fiber is part of that carbohydrate family. Doesn't have to be anything huge. Maybe just a little handful of something, a little piece of toast and some hard-boiled eggs or whatever. Like just a little kickstart to something. Or just centering yourself, doing those little small breaths. Or going through, and if you feel very overwhelmed, okay, let's create some priorities. What's something realistic that I know I can get done in the day? Now, midday, again, this might require you setting a timer or a reminder in your schedule just to kind of check in with yourself and do a little recharge. Maybe if you work in an office or you're at school and you have like a natural break there, this could be when you go outside and you hang out with your friends. You can step away. I'm a huge fan of stepping away from your desk when you're eating, even if you work at home. Just go be someplace else. Or that could be a time that you're like, let me refresh some things, let me grab some snacks, let me just do like we did before, some of the breathing exercises, kind of like feel how stress or tension might be sitting in with your body. Recognize that and try to implement something just to ease that for that moment. And then evening wind down time. So if you're like me, again, maybe you have a time where you brush your teeth, you change into your pajamas, and then you kind of implement some of these things too. You're signaling to your body, that's it, work is done. I have changed environments. I have changed mindset. It's time to transition into that restful mode. So this is where you're dimming the screens or you're dimming the lights, or maybe you do like a brain dump. I love doing that. I love saying like, what is it that I've done today that I feel I might need to remember tomorrow? And also that last bullet there about reflecting on something. Could be one thing, could be many things. Like I'm really proud of myself, right? I feel like a lot of times we focus on, I didn't get nearly as much as I wanted to get done today. And instead it's like, I'm so proud of myself of the things that I put into play. I'm so excited that I got that thing done. I'm happy that I met with that person and checked in with my loved one. And that really, brought me joy and it really refilled my cup. And then maybe on the weekends, or however, if you work, different hours and schedules than what is considered a standard or traditional work week, maybe you have 2 or 1 day that you have for yourself, so it's a Tuesday or whatever. Use that time to restore and reset. Not just catch up on all the things. Be like, okay, now's the time that I'm going to do my shopping, my meal prepping, get my groceries in order. Maybe now's the time I get to catch up with my family and go play outside. Maybe now's the time that I'm not just doing those small little 5 minute bursts of movement. Now I can actually like go for a run, or I can go for a swim, or I can do whatever it is that just makes me feel good in my body. And then maybe you also use this too, because I do Sunday nights, like around 7:30 on Sunday night. I kind of look forward to the week coming up, and then I set my alarms for the very next day of about 20 minutes before my meetings or whatever my activities are for that day, is I just do a little pre-planning. And of course, things can be flexible and revised as you go, but I think that's nice just to kind of get the added glance look at things, and your weekend could be used for something like that as well. So as we're coming up, we are almost, I can't believe I've been chatting for about 40 minutes now. As we're coming up at the end of our conversation, our webinar here, I hope that you understand that some of the key takeaways I'm hoping for you is that your health, your overall health, your physical and mental well-being, it really does come down to those habits, those things that are going to feel consistent and repeatable and doable, realistic, sustainable. So it's not the things that you're just driving in these extreme restrictive, one and done. Like it has to be something that your body and yourself is going to be able to maintain over the course of the rest of your life. Small patterns drive big outcomes. So don't worry so much about feeling overwhelmed by things. Just know, right, there's consistency involved in this. There's something that I feel, again, that language I'm using of things that are on autopilot. How am I reframing or restructuring what I feel is consistent? And that can change too, right? A pattern doesn't have to be something you're doing 7 days a week. It could be like every Tuesday I do this, and that's how I invest in or prioritize my health. And that consistency matters more than effort. So that is where the true success is. It's not just what I'm doing once in a while. It's how am I able to repeat and build on those habits that I'm trying to incorporate in my life. So, oops, did I pass one? No, there we go. So, like I said, I'm doing handouts now with my webinars. So, you'll get this after the fact. When you get the email with the recording, there'll be a link to download the handout. It's a two-pager this month, and it's just basically a repetition of some of the key language that I used in today's webinar. And there is a little on the, think on the back side, there's little sections in there. So feel free to use it, print it out, or use your own version of this, like use it as inspiration, as I always like to say, and just focus on things that you think you can really implement into your life. So whether you're working in 3-day chunks or 3-week chunks or 3-month chunks or the next 6 months for the rest of the year, just take it one habit at a time and try to define again for yourself what that consistency looks like, what that success looks like for you. At the end of every webinar, I always say, reflect on what we've just learned today. What are some things you want to start doing? How are you going to implement that into your, your mid-year reset or your next plan? What are things that you're like, I'm already working on this. It's great. It's working great. That's the whole point, right? To be consistent and keep up on those things. And what's something that maybe is no longer serving you? Like, unfortunately, I had to let go of one of my jobs and I had only just started it about 9 months ago, unfortunately. And I'm not a big fan of just quitting before I put in at least a year with something. But I physically and mentally had no space for it. So while I enjoyed what I did, while I loved the people with whom I worked, I just couldn't, I was spreading myself far too thin. And it was the only thing that required me to have to be on site for something. So I was not able to work remotely where almost all of my other jobs allows me that flexibility. So that's something I had to let go. And I mean, I kind of still have like a toe in the water there. I'm able to reach out to them. I didn't necessarily completely detach from myself, and we never know what the future is going to hold as things may change on my end. Maybe I'll be able to get back into that. But for now, it was one of those things that I just couldn't be productive. I couldn't feel comfortable, and I was very stressed out trying to juggle all the things. So think about that in your own life too, whether it's part of those pillars, whether it's part of your day, whether it's part of social aspects, financial aspects. What are some things that you're kind of struggling with right now or happy about right now, or things that you're like, you know what, by the end of this year, I need to get cracking on that thing I wanted to do. That's something you can start after today. As you know, I do these wellness webinars for free. So I love asking you for your support, not necessarily monetarily. I mean, you can always send me donations. I have a PayPal and things, but aside from that, a way that you can support me and what I do and the people with whom I work sometimes, like I said, with the nutrition students and dietetic interns, is just check me out, click on things, share stuff. I love when people say, oh, I saw this video that you did, or I watched this podcast episode that you did, and I found it so inspiring, and I sent it to one of my friends, and now she's going to reach out to somebody and maybe work with them. So that makes me feel so happy. I mentioned earlier, I've been doing these wellness webinars probably every single month for maybe the last 3.5, 4 years consistently. So there is quite a library of stuff in the Dish with Dina YouTube channel. So obviously I'd love for you to subscribe and follow and click and share and like and all those things too. But just know that stuff exists there. I used to have 5.5 years, I had a podcast. So I interviewed a ton of different people from all walks of life. Mostly the discussions were around health and wellness, and it's everything. It's everything from very rare diseases to mindset stuff. And again, I just thought it was so interesting to be paired up with complete strangers that I met on the internet and then learn their life story. And now I get to share all that with you as well. So maybe there are things in that YouTube channel that resonate with you. I do have a private practice. It's pretty part-time. It's 100% online. I work with a wide variety of patient populations. I work across about 10 state lines, and I work with a lot of different insurance companies as well. So if you want to learn more about that too, you can head over to dishwithdina.com. Click on all the things, check out some of the things that I do for nutrition counseling. I do self-pay things, I do flexible pay things. So I always want to make sure people know they have access to me, regardless of whether or not your insurance pays for it. We can always find a way to work together. All right, friends, that brings me to the end of this month's webinar. I'm so grateful to anybody who's registered, who stopped by live, or who watches this later on in the recording or on the YouTube channel. The next webinar for our July discussion, kind of along the lines of what we sort of talked a little bit about today, of implementing that mindfulness when we are eating. So more specifically about food, nutrition, habits, timing. I feel like this could be helpful for people who maybe don't have an active appetite or hunger cue, and or maybe are struggling a little bit with their relationship with food, like food controls me, there's food noise around this, and hopefully this discussion will help you support and manage that as well. So I'm going to hop into the chat because I haven't looked at it at all, so I apologize if you're all chiming in. Oh, thank you so much. It's so nice to see you again. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. If there are any questions, comments, and or feedback, I have a few more minutes to hang out here. If not, I will wrap up and I will hope to see you again in the next webinar. Thanks, everybody. Eat well and be well. Take care of yourselves.